Om Namah Shivaya, Namaste, Jetsunma
Lovely to see
Palmo.
you, Rukmini. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm very happy to see you, and I'm very happy to record this interview with you for our Unity and Diversity Symposium here in Shivananda, Bahamas. We just started, and I think our community are really waiting for this every year. We've been doing this interview. Previously, you were actually coming in person, which was really amazing for us, but I understand now you're not traveling to this area, so we are grateful that you have taken the time to meet with us and answer some questions from our community. And I'd like to start by asking you how things are going for you there in India with your nunnery and all your work. We always like to get updates about your mission, your important mission, and your place there.
Well, this year went very nicely. It was actually our 25th anniversary. So it's hard to believe we've been going for 25 years, but we have. So in mid-October, we held a kind of jubilee. And several of our old friends from abroad, from like Australia and America, etc., came especially to attend this. And the nuns did their ritual dancing and put on a play, a costume drama, which had everybody in tears. It was a sad story, but with a happy ending. But for us, the really important thing was during this jubilee, then our monastery is rather special because it has what are called togden, which are yogis, who, although they dress like yogis and have dreadlocks, they are monks. And so I had requested our Lama Kapta Rinpoche to please recognize 4 of our nuns in long-term retreat as Togden Ma or yoginis, and to offer the robes to them. They have been in retreat now for 16 years. So I figured it was time they got recognized. So they did that. They sent over a senior Togden, and he presented these special robes to the 4 of them. So for us, this was really a big breakthrough in what had up to that time been rather an exclusive boys' club. And so now they are recognizing the women too, as they should. And they did it with great joy. I mean, it wasn't that they were resentful. They said, oh, yes, yes, and did so. So that was for us really a great fulfillment. And apart from that, the nuns are really very well. I'll send you a copy of our newsletter online, okay? So you can see how we're all doing. They're fine. We have 115, 120 nuns now. And the nuns just recently said that we need more rooms. They were aiming for 200 nuns. I said, that's too many. And we compromised on 150. So now we're building new dormitories, new accommodation for the senior nuns. So we're fine, we're good.
So congratulations, these are wonderful news. And,
yeah.
It's really your life mission to make the teachings accessible to women in Tibetan Buddhism, and it's really happening. We would like to ask if you can say something about really women in Tibetan Buddhism. Do you see that things are changing?
Oh, they're very much changing. I mean, because the main change is in education. Previously, as with the rest of the world, really, until recent times, female education was not given any priority. And it's in the last 20, 25 years, 30 years, really the whole attitude towards women has changed very, very much. And of course, nowadays also when lamas, etc., go out and about, the majority of their audience are women, either in Asia or in the West. And so they can't ignore anymore that these highly educated women are expecting the same kind of teachings which were traditionally only given to, well, mostly only given to monks. So it's interesting how the lamas themselves are adapting to the changing times, and the fact that most of their students nowadays are lay women, not monks. Interesting what will happen next, right?
Yeah, amazing. This is wonderful. Thank you for sharing. You mentioned that some of the nuns are doing retreat for 16 years, and last night I spoke with a few people who read the book about your life, your story, the cave in the snow, and some of our guest presenters also mentioned that they read the book and were very inspired. And people wanted to ask, I know you don't like often to ask that we ask personal questions, but if you can say something about your life in retreat and in general, any advice to people who are interested in retreat?
Well, in the Tibetan tradition, there is, apart from, of course, an emphasis on studying philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, there's also, especially in our tradition, a lot of emphasis on undertaking certain practices in an isolated situation called retreat. And the idea is that one can then give all of one's energy to the practice without any distraction, or as little distraction as possible. So my Lama Kamta Rinpoche, after I had been working with him for a few years, sort of as his secretary and teaching English to little monks, then said, okay, now it's time you went away to practice. So he told me to go to this Himalayan area of Lahul, which is a Tibetan Buddhist area, even though the people themselves are Indian. So I did that. I didn't know how long I would stay. I stayed there for 18 years because it was an ideal location. And for the first 6 years I lived in the monastery. Then I felt I needed a more isolation. And so that's when we came up with the cave. So it was a very good situation, because not only, and in the winter for many months it was snow, so nobody could come. But it was regarded as a very holy place, especially for female energy, called Dakinis. It's called the land of the Dakinis, and it was regarded as being especially in the past, in many centuries past, great yogis had gone there and practiced there. And also because the people in that area were Buddhist, I didn't have any worries about being isolated female. I mean, in those days I was young. But I never worried at all, because the people understood that it's very good that somebody was living up there, right? They didn't regard it as being in any way aberrant, that they felt, yes, oh, this is very good that you're staying there, and blessing in that way the whole valley. So yeah, it's good sometimes to be in an isolated situation, because things come up that one has to deal with that mightn't do so if one was in more society. I mean, group retreats are good because you get teachings and you have other people with you to kind of raise the energy. But also being in isolation can also be very helpful, because then you have to just look at your own mind. And That's all you've got, right? I mean, this was in the days before smartphones and computers and all that sort of thing. I mean, I had no contact with outside. And so really, in the end, you're just left with your own mind to deal with. So that can sometimes be, for some people, depending on their mind, very inspiring or very alarming, depending what comes up.
So how was it for you to be like that in isolation? And what practice, what was the practice? And can you say more about being alone with your mind?
Well, I mean, basically, I was doing a lot of what's called sadhana, you know, on various Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and deities. My Lama, usually every year I would go back to see my Lama, and then he would suggest what I could do next, or I would say, how about doing such and such? And he would say, oh, yes, great. Or you want to do that? Which I assume meant not such a good idea. So a lot of mantra recitation, of course, and also a lot of practice on observing the mind, because we all are thinking constantly, but we so rarely ask ourselves, what is a thought? And so a lot of the Tibetan practice is also about observing the mind and understanding, you know, that we are not our thoughts and feelings. We have thoughts and feelings, but they're not really our true nature. I mean, we are all, I think, not just in Buddhism, but in Hinduism, certainly, and in other religions, probably, looking to find the very essential nature of the mind. What is it?
What is the essential nature of the mind?
Yeah, that's what we have to look and find out. But basically, as you know very well, it's dealing with that level of consciousness which is behind the duality of observer and observed. You know, I mean, I could say it's like the knowing, the pure knowing before the split into knower and known. And that level of pure consciousness is what, of course, connects us with all beings. Our dualistic mind separates us. There's me and there's you. But on a most profound level, there is not that split anymore. I mean, we're all interconnected far more than we can possibly appreciate with our ordinary conceptual thinking. But the problem is that though we can, glimpse that level of awareness, it's very difficult to sustain it and become familiar with it. That's why everybody does these long retreats, is to try to, to be able to stabilize that level of realization.
So once you stabilize, does it stay with you when you go out of retreat?
Well, it should, otherwise it's not stable. Oh, at least you can call it up when you want it, you know. Yes, there it is, they say. They're familiar with it, and that's the point. And then that level of really pure awareness is it consists of our wisdom and compassion. I mean, it's not something sterile or blank. It's like when we wake up, I mean, that's why they talk about awakening, right? It's like suddenly we realize normally we're just living a dream. And so that connects us with the deepest level of our being, which is something very very different from who we think we are normally. But mostly, even for, you know, experts like the Tibetans were, it takes time, usually.
So attaining that state of connection that you just described, the non-dual awareness, how will it change someone's life? How will their life look different? In what way? In their relationship with the world, with themselves?
Well, I think it's very different. I mean, normally we live our life, you know, encompassed with our sense of self, of ego. And along with that, the hopes and fears, you know, the hoping it's going to be okay, fearing it won't be okay. And as you know, I mean, especially nowadays in the state of the world, people become very anxious, very fearful, very angry, and caught up in all their emotional turmoil. Whereas if one really sees deeply the nature of the mind, then all that grasping falls away, which is why even when, you know, great masters are in very, very difficult situations, they nonetheless remain very tranquil and still full of compassion and caring. They're not caught up in their own anxieties and fears and anger and all these things. That simply doesn't pertain. They're not there. So, I mean, therefore, inside they have great joy. I mean, it's, as you know very well, on the spiritual path, it's very important to have this inner sense of joy and freedom. And so that is there the whole time, which is why people go to them as masters, because they can see they know something that most of the world doesn't know.
Would you say that the master or guru is essential in this sense? What is the understanding of the role of the guru?
Well, of course, you know, in the older times, in traditional times, a teacher was essential because, one, most people were not educated and couldn't just read a book like that, like we can nowadays. Secondly, there was no YouTubes or online discourses, and therefore you needed to have someone there who had gone further along the road than you had in order to become a guide. And of course, that is still very helpful and important, but it's not as vital at the beginning as it used to be, because now there are so many, you know, there are, as we say, online teachings and courses. There are so many books and so forth. So we can get started by ourselves. We don't need to really wait for the guru to appear before sitting down and watching our breath. But eventually, of course, if one is really committed, then it is really very, very helpful, if not essential, to have direction from someone that you trust, knows what they're talking about. I mean, that they're not just because they read it in books, but because they themselves have experienced, and so they're speaking from their own level of realization. And so, you know, depending on how much one is committed to one's path, eventually one would need to have somebody there to give very clear direction. And of course, for the arising of devotion, because that is regarded as very important on the spiritual path. And certainly in the Hindu and the Tibetan tradition, one's level of devotion is regarded as essential. The problem always is that one doesn't know I mean, one by devotion means total openness and trust. So one has to, you know, how to know whether this person really is worthy of trust or not. That's always nowadays, especially, becoming quite a problem for people. But if one does have someone who is really genuinely trustworthy, and most of them are, it's only a small percentage who are not, then that takes you that much more swiftly. And you can walk with confidence because you've got someone, a proper guide to show you the path and with what to avoid and what to go for.
So assuming that problem of trust is resolved, is that not an issue, can you say more on the devotion to the Guru as a path?
Well, the Tibetans say it's like the sun is always shining, and the sun is very, very hot and incredible. But if you put a piece of paper on the ground under the sun, still the most that will happen is that it will get a bit crisp, a bit dry. But if you put a magnifying glass between the rays of the sun and the paper, then very quickly the paper will turn brown and start to smoke and then burst into flames. So the sun is compared to the blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, but the magnifying glass is, of course, the Guru, the Lama, and he concentrates all these rays. And so if you are there directly open to receiving the blessings, then very quickly the mind will, as it were, catch fire. I mean, in other words, one will gain a realization of the nature of the mind. And in fact, the Tibetans, in certain traditions, to start the practice of observing the mind, you're supposed to go to a Lama and ask for what is called the pointing out instruction, where he points out the nature of the mind. And then with that glimpse, then you go, you go forward trying to stabilize what that realization, even if it only lasted for a very short time.
So you mentioned earlier you got instructions from your teacher and you went to the cave for retreat, and you mentioned that the practice included meditation. Specifically, you mentioned mantras and deities and observing the mind. So are these three different techniques? Can you explain more about the actual technique, what you practiced?
In the Tibetan, in the Vajrayana tradition, you see yourself as the deity. I mean, the importance is to recognize that the deity isn't something out there, but is the reflection of the nature of the mind. And so all the different deities are one in the ultimate nature. So it's not like there are many really all different deities, but they all are just like if you have a pure crystal and you shine light through it, then it takes on rainbow colors. And likewise, from the nature of the ultimate reality of the mind, it takes on different forms of deities, sometimes very peaceful, sometimes slightly wrathful, or so on. But that you practice to recognize that is our true nature. It's not something outside of ourselves. It's who we really are. If only we knew that's who we are, right? I mean, you might think, if you were doing, say, a practice on Tara, she is the Bodhisattva Buddha who represents fearless compassion. And so you would sit there thinking, okay, now I'm going to do a Tara. I'm going to visualize myself as Tara, lights going out and all beings become Tara. But in the back of your mind, we're thinking, well, I'm Rukmini, and now I'm going to pretend to be Tara. And that is the essential problem, because in truth, you are Tara pretending to be Rukmini, right? So, I mean, the Tara is our true nature. The conceptual thinking mind is the Rukmini part. So therefore, in these practices, one sees oneself as a deity, one recites the mantra of that particular Buddha or Bodhisattva, and then absorbing everything back into the nature of the mind. And then when one has dissolved everything back into the nature of the mind, you sit and look at the nature of the mind, which is emptiness and at the same time luminous clarity. I mean, it's what helps. I mean, we couldn't think if it wasn't for the fact that we are conscious, that we're aware. But that awareness we don't recognize. Anyway, it's a very complicated subject. Let's leave that.
It's very nice teachings, very much related also to our path, the use of the deities and the mantras, and then going into the ultimate reality.
Exactly.
So speaking of the ultimate reality, they say that in Buddhism, they don't believe in God, but there is ultimate reality. So what is the belief in the Buddhist path?
Well, they don't believe in a creator God. There's something separate out there that's pulling all the strings. I mean, you know, of course, Buddhists believe that our actions have results, right? And so we believe in karma. That's why things happen, not because somebody out there decides this is going to happen to you, but because of the causes and conditions which we ourselves have created in this and in past lives. So ultimate reality is not something that you can catch hold of or pinpoint. It's often compared to the sky or to space, in that it is all pervading everywhere, but you can't catch it, you can't grasp it, you can't see it, you can't taste it, you can't touch it, and yet it's omnipresent. And that's like the level of our mind. We're mostly obscured by clouds, so we identify with the clouds. But sometimes if you keep looking at the clouds, then the clouds part, and then behind the clouds there's the sky, and you recognize that the clouds have just come from the sky, go back into the sky, but the sky itself is infinite, beyond subject and object. But that has to be realized. That's the point. I mean, saying it is one thing, but actually experiencing that, and that we are not who we think we are, and nor is anyone else. Everyone, in Buddhist terminology, everybody has Buddha nature. But it's not like something, you know, unique inside us, like a little Buddha. It still means this open, infinite nature of the mind.
So you mentioned that the most important thing is to realize that, to experience that, because it's not the philosophy, it's the practice really that will take you there. Mm-hmm. So there was a question that came from one of our staff about the practice and having the discipline and the willpower, especially when you feel weak, to actually sustain a steady practice. What is your...
Well, I think one should, it helps maybe to start small and simple. So normally in Buddhism, there are two levels. One is called shamatha, which means like calm, abiding, and vipassana, which means insight. So first we have to get our mind well tamed, right? It's like if you consider, you see this wild horse, and it's a beautiful horse, actually, but it's wild. So therefore, you want it to go left, it goes right. You want it to stand, it will run. You want it to run, it will stand. It's not going to do what you want it to do, but its potential is wonderful. So first, we have to tame the horse. We have to make the horse trust us and calm down and then want to be trained, right? So first we have to tame, then we have to train it. And from training, it becomes transformed. And then eventually we can transcend the ordinary conceptual thinking mind. And so first we have to tame the mind. And the Buddha always referred to it as a mad monkey, jumping all over the place and totally out of control. We want to do this and we want to do that. So first, the meditation is just to simply cultivate the quality of attention and being able to be aware so that the mind becomes workable. So that if we want to put it here, it will stay there. We want to put it there, it will stay there. It's not jumping all over the place. In other words, we gradually become masters of our mind instead of slaves of our mind. And so that takes time. And the best way to do it is actually the best way to do it is to do a meditation course with somebody who will explain the stages and what to do and encourage us. And you have other people around you also sitting and they look like they're all in samadhi. So therefore you've got to think, oh, yeah, I've got to keep here practicing. Actually, for most people, that is best. It's more encouraging and more inspiring. If people have never practiced before sit down to meditate by themselves, they're likely to feel discouraged because at first it seems like you've got more thoughts, not less. As we become more conscious of the mind, how noisy the mind is. It's like having a television on the whole time, right? I mean, we might be sitting here just looking at our whatever, but the television is blaring out in the background. So we need to therefore cultivate this ability to be aware, to be conscious, without being distracted by what's going on in the background. And so small periods, and also walking meditation is helpful because you're moving. Then you sit for 10 minutes, 20 minutes. 20 minutes is good. Half an hour, then more walking, then sit again. And gradually the mind becomes accustomed. Our mind is accustomed to being wild, so it takes time to calm it down. But then even if one only has a few minutes of calm meditation, suddenly the mind calms, then it brings such a sense of inner joy, even if it's only for a few minutes, that encourages us to believe, yes, we can do this. Mostly it's a matter of believing that we can actually change the nature of the mind. But as I say, it all takes a bit of time. We shouldn't expect we'd sit down and immediately get enlightened. It's unlikely.
So you mentioned this advice in the context of beginners, but what about people who are already on the path for many years? From your experience, is it possible that they will also have periods of lack of motivation, lack of inspiration, and what to do?
Yeah, that's a difficult one, and it's really fairly common. I mean, people even who have been practicing 10, 15, 20 years, at a certain point, they ran out of inspiration. And that is probably the most difficult thing, to overcome that. oh, sorry. So maybe they could try to encourage themselves, start again something small, not too much, not ambitious. Maybe go and meet with masters, read an inspiring book, try a different method of practice for a change, because sometimes, we're human beings and our mind is very tricky. And so sometimes we just get bored, quite frankly. And to accept that's all part of the path and not to worry about it. No, this one, then that one. Sorry, pills. Yeah, so I mean, try to re-inspire oneself, not, push too much and relax. It's very important to also in our practice to not be too tense or too goal orientated, right? Especially Westerners, because Westerners are always, wanting to achieve something. And that is really not helpful. It's just the ego wanting to, make something of itself, to be more spiritual. What Trungpa Rinpoche called spiritual materialism. And so we need to just, relax, give ourselves a break, and then maybe try to re-motivate ourselves. Even doing a different practice to see how that goes, right? Just to bring back that inner joy that we had at the beginning. It's a hard one, actually, and it's people shouldn't despair, because people often go through that, and then they come out the other end. We are frozen.
I think we're back.
Yes.
You mentioned the ego. And I remember in the past you talked about, on one hand, we all have the goal to somehow overcome this ego, but you also mentioned about people whose ego needs healing first. Can you explain that?
Yes, I think it's a very important point, because until we are at an extremely high level of spiritual advancement, we have an ego, we have a sense of me, a sense of self. And very often people, especially when they get onto a spiritual path, they are quite, I don't know in Hinduism, but in Buddhism, they tend to be quite mean to themselves. That anything they think anything positive about themselves, they regard that as being a self-cherishing mind. But in fact, if one looks at how the Buddha taught the practice, first he started with this practice of shamatha, or calm abiding, to get the mind into good shape so that we can use it skillfully, like a surgeon with a scalpel, right? You have to make the mind amenable to being worked with. But at the same time, he also said that we should practice what are actually called the Brahma Viharas, or the divine abodes, in which we give our loving kindness and friendliness, and then compassion, and then rejoicing, and then equanimity, first to ourselves. First, we think, may I be well and happy. May I be peaceful and at my ease. May I be free from suffering. In other words, we start to make friends with ourselves. After that, we give love and compassion, etc., to people we care for, that we love, then people that we are quite indifferent towards, strangers, or people that we see that we never think that they would like to be happy. and free from suffering. And then people that we have problems with, that we don't like or have hurt us, and then to all the world. But we start with ourselves. We start by making friends with ourselves, forgiving ourselves, working to make ourselves feel okay, so that we are able to walk the spiritual path. I mean, sometimes I say it's like if you break your leg, then the leg is in a cast, and we can't move much. It's very awkward. We're always thinking, oh, my poor leg, my poor leg. Somebody hits the leg, ow, oh, my leg, my leg, my leg. Why? Because the leg is sick. And likewise with our ego, if our ego is not well, is not healthy, then we're always thinking me, 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 me. So once the leg is healed and we take the cast off, we can run, skip, and jump, and we're not thinking leg. Who thinks about their leg when their leg doesn't hurt? Right? It's very useful to have a leg, but it's, we're not thinking about my leg. We only think about the leg when we're sitting in meditation and our legs ache. Then we're thinking leg, leg, leg. But as long as it's okay, we're not thinking about it. And likewise with our ego, if our ego is healthy and we are friends with ourselves, then we're not really thinking much about ourselves, because we're more interested in others. So this is why it's even on the spiritual path, it might seem counterintuitive to give so much attention first to making yourself healthy. But in the end, it's the only way, because otherwise along the path, we're going to come up with a lot of obstacles if we haven't really a very healthy and balanced sense of self. And that is walking along the path towards the dissolution of the self. But just saying there is no I, who is saying there is no I if not me, right? I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Thank you for clarifying this. So beyond healing our relationship with ourselves, I understand we also have to work on our relationship with others, and specifically cultivate virtues like kindness, compassion. Is this also a requirement, like in the Buddhist path, as a preliminary for the more advanced meditation?
Well, yes, definitely. I mean, that's why, although it's very good to do retreats and do meditation at the same time, I say it's like breathing in and you breathe out, right? You have to breathe in and breathe out to have a balance. And so a lot of the qualities needed on the spiritual path, like obviously ethics and generosity and patience and kindness and compassion, these need other people, because they are the ones we're going to practice on. I mean, it's one thing to sit in your retreat and think, may all beings be well and happy. But then when you go out and you meet these beings, sometimes it's a little more difficult. So they are helping us, and especially the difficult ones are helping us to cultivate. I mean, how can we cultivate patience if nobody ever annoys us, right? So instead of being upset by that person who is being so disagreeable, we can appreciate that actually they are our teachers of patience. And all these other qualities that we need to cultivate, we need other people to help us to do so. So it's really important to recognize that, we need to go in, but then also we need to go out. I mean, you have the perfect job. Look, you're spending all your time having to deal with people and all their unrealistic expectations and demands, and at the same time keep smiling and loving them all.
Yes. I remember many years ago when you presented here in the ashram, in the temple, you told a story about a dream that you had something with the prison and escaping from the prison.
Yes.
Can you tell us about this dream?
Should I? Okay, well, just recently, a couple of days ago, we were having a Zoom interview with these Buddhist monks in Seattle, and they asked exactly the same question. So that's why I'm looking at Philippe and wondering, okay, so the dream basically was that we are in a huge, infinitely vast prison. And some people are in penthouse suites, and some people, you go down level after level after level, and some are in the dungeons. And there were people who were laughing and partying, and people who were arguing, and people who were crying, and people who were laughing, and everything you could imagine, all these like vignettes of all these different situations. But even the ones who were up on the top, they could go down anytime. And the ones down could go up anytime. It was terribly insecure. You never knew what was going to happen, and we were all in this prison. So I thought, we have to get out. This is a prison. And so I went around talking with many people saying, look, we've got to escape. We've got to get out. And mostly people said, oh, well, yeah, but, it's not so bad. And, escaping is very difficult. I don't know if I can manage that. It's okay here, And I kept saying, no, it's a prison. And they were not very enthusiastic to go. But eventually, two friends said, okay, we'll escape if you escape. So then there was like this canal with a boat, and there were guards on either side. And I thought that they would try to stop us, but they didn't. They ignored us completely. And we got in the boat and we went out from the prison. And then we started running, and we were running parallel to the prison. And on the left was this prison and all windows. And so as I was running, I could see, again, people crying, people laughing, people partying, people working, all different kinds of people doing all different kinds of things. And I was running and running and running, and the prison was endless. I couldn't get beyond it. And I became so tired. And then I thought, this is impossible. We cannot get beyond this prison. And, they were right. It's a waste of time. It's just exhausting. So, okay, I give up. I'm going back. Then I thought, no, but if I go back, my friends who are only coming because they're running after me, they will go back too. So therefore, for their sake, I have to keep running. And as soon as I thought that, as soon as I was thinking I've got to go for their sake, then the prison came to an end and ended up in a kind of very suburban looking road. I loved that when I woke up, I loved how my mind came up with this kind of suburbia with trees and bushes and nice houses. And so then I walked up to the first house I came to and knocked on the door. And this woman, there's some middle-aged woman, very sort of like a housewife. She said, oh, you've come from that place. Yes, well, not many people get out from there, but don't worry, you're safe now. But you must go and help all the others to come out too. And I said, well, it's really very difficult because nobody's interested. You know, how much, and I'm only me, I can't do, you know, help all these people to escape. And she said, no, no, don't worry, you're not alone. There's a whole organization. I had a kind of vision of some kind of bureaucratic, you know, like the government or something, all different departments. And she said, you'll work for them and they will help you. Don't worry. So I said, okay, then I will work with you. And then I woke up. Then I laughed because I thought, well, you know, you see salvation as a kind of suburban house.
And so that dream was many years ago.
Yeah.
So
yeah, when I was in the cave.
And how do you understand it today?
Well, I think it's true that we are all trapped in samsara. And samsara is indeed, I mean, whether you're up or whether you're down, and it's a wheel, so it keeps going round and round and round. And it is indeed very insecure. You never know. Today, everything's wonderful. Tomorrow, disaster strikes. We just don't know. And we are trapped in, you know, though, I mean, on one level, the prison is the prison of the ego, but it's also the, you know, the outer prison of our inability to see things how they really are and how we construct our outer reality. And that the only answer is to really be practicing not just for the sake of yourself, but for the sake of others. I mean, in the Mahayana tradition, you take a vow that you will come back again and again and again until all of samsara is freed. I mean, that's going to take a long time, at the rate we're going.
So, Jetsunma, I'm looking at the time, and I know you have plans you have to go to Nepal today or something. You're busy, I know. So, I just wanted maybe to ask if we can conclude with some kind of a message from you to our community and to everyone who's listening for the new year, and also maybe address specifically some of the challenges that people are going through these days with everything that is happening. Some message of hope and advice.
Well, I mean, yes, this last year has been very, very difficult for so many millions of people. Really, it's not been a very auspicious year. It was the year of the dragon, and we had great hopes that the dragon would dispel the negativity, but somehow or other it didn't happen. So I personally, I think the most important thing is that we should, two things. One, we should not take sides. We should recognize that all beings, all living beings, really in their heart of heart wish for happiness and do not wish to suffer. And even though people do really weird things, they imagine that somehow it's going to give them satisfaction. And so it's very important not to take sides and to send out love and compassion to everybody, to all beings, and to really, really from our heart wish that they should be well and happy and be peaceful and at their ease. And the second thing is to remember that despite the fact that we hear every day about these awful things which are being done all around the world, and of course, especially in Israel at this time and in the Ukraine, but still there is so much goodness in the world, and that is not reported. So we should not give up hope, because our true nature is completely beautiful. maybe we've lost sight of our true nature, but it's always there waiting to be discovered. So ultimately, we are good. And ultimately, good will triumph. But in the meantime, it may, go through a bit of a trauma in the meantime. But never to give up hope, and also especially to send out love and compassion to all the beings, and especially all those poor beings caught in this terrible, terrible tangle which the politicians have handed to us. So, yes, sit quietly, send love to yourself, then love to the loved ones, and then to those who are difficult, who are causing problems. Just really from our heart, wish that they might be well, that they may, the negativity which is in them, which causes so much pain to themselves and to others, may that be healed. And really, really wish happiness and well-being to all those beings which inhabit this incredible planet. And the belief that truly, maybe sometime, especially the young people, may actually wake up because they recognize that this is not going the way they would want it for their future. And they are thinking in ways which, when I was their age, we didn't think like that. And now they really are caring for what's happening to the world and to the environment. And so let us hope that, something will move in a more positive direction. And meantime, love is the answer.
Love is the answer. Thank you so much. That was such a beautiful way to conclude our interview, and beautiful message from you to everyone. I would like to thank you for taking the time today. On behalf of our spiritual teacher, Swami Rupananda, and all the Swamis here and in Israel, and all over our organization, and all of our guests and staff, we also wish to wish you success, continued success with your nunnery, with your mission, and we hope to see you soon, hopefully here, or if not, then elsewhere. And Merry Christmas today.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I've just remembered the next Tibetan year is a rabbit, isn't it?
I don't know.
And this year has been a dragon, so it's been very, wild energy. But I think
the previous one was a rabbit.
the
next one.
What's the next
Let
one?
me check.
Maybe it's something more peaceful. That's what I'm hoping.
Let me see. Isn't it a tiger? After
No,
dragon,
is it a tiger?
No, a snake.
A snake?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that doesn't sound too inviting,
No.
but snakes are actually very nice creatures.
Mm.
Most of them don't have any desire to harm us. I lived one time in a room for several months with a snake. Yeah, I had a hole in the wall, and I figured it had been there before I came. So we became quite friendly. I mean, we'd curl up when I was doing my practice and just sit there quietly. Snakes are nice.
I don't know what element it is, though.
Anyway, whatever. Let us hope that the new year will bring in some sanity into this world, because we desperately need a bit of wisdom and a bit of compassion and some genuine clarity about where we're going and where we're likely to reach out to. So fantastic, Rukmini, that you and all your colleagues are giving these sessions for people to really help them to get balanced in their lives and, you know, follow the right way. It's really great that you're doing that. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.